Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of Wednesday, June 17th, 2015. Could I please have the roll call?
Salem Derby.
Present.
Dan Hagan.
Present.
Jennifer Hayes.
Here.
JP Kuczynski.
Here.
Joe McCoy.
Here.
Dan Risk.
Here.
Tamara Smith.
Here.
Joy Winnie. Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
Okay, could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we move on with the meeting, I do like to read something. I'd like to take a moment to remember someone very special. Let's see if we can get through this. Our community lost last weekend. Many of us in the council knew Deborah Tosnick very well. She was frequently beside her husband, Mayor Mike Tosnick, over the many years she served the community. Although she shied away from the political spotlight, Deb brought an impressive resume of work on conservation issues, helping the needy and supporting the developing artistic community in East Hampton. Wherever she went, Deb brought a feeling of generosity and kindness. Deb Tosnick will certainly be missed. If we could all please take a moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much. Public speak time. If there's anyone from the council. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry. Approval of the minutes. Could I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of May 20th?
Move that we approve May 20th and June 3rd? Or do we have-
Second.
Donald Psychowski.
I'm sorry, Don, we're still approving minutes here.
1 second then.
Is there a motion, is there a second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Okay, Don, now public speak time.
Okay. Donald Psychowski, 86 February Street, East Hampton, Mass. Citizen of this town my whole life. Talking about the conditions of the road and the BPW. I'm very disappointed. I think there's going to have to be some reorganization in that department. I have one suggestion. Go back to, if we can do it by administrative code, go back to 3 elected officials and working foremen report to the elected officials. We maybe can free up a couple $100,000. And the other thing of it is, how many jobs have we got in this town now that can be part-time instead of full-time? That's another thing that you have to be looked into. We gotta do something for revenue in this town. We might have to cut people and everything else. It's about time we start working in that direction instead of just going on the way we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's anyone else from the public who'd like to address the council on a topic other than that's on the city council, on the public hearing, please just come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's John Knievel. I live on 17 Fort Hill Road in East Hampton. I just have a couple questions for the council. Some of you may be aware that a brewery has moved into our quiet little neighborhood and is causing some problems. We seem to be getting some unclear information about which part of the town administration is responsible for some of the problems that we have. We have some noise issues from the mayor's office. She told us that the police were in charge of enforcing it, and the police say, no, we're not in charge of enforcing it, so we're not quite sure what to do or who to talk to. We also have issues with over what they're supposed to be. The rules were set by the planning board that it was never going to be a bar. They were never to sell alcohol or be open for a bar. Since then, they've got a pouring license through the licensing board and now have an entertainment permit. So the original agreement was made that there would never be more than 20 cars in the parking lot. And they were parking out on the street a couple of weeks ago. So we just need, who's in charge of enforcing what the planning board set forth?
First of all, as far as this part of the city council meeting, we're kind of bound by open meeting law, so we can't discuss with you right now.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is probably the first place to start would be either your precinct city councilor, who I believe is Jen Hayes in precinct 2.
All right.
So she would be the first, because it sounds like there's a multitude of issues there.
We have a lot, yeah.
So it may go to different places. So I would start with her, and also we have any of the at-large city councilors, Councilor Kwasinski, myself, Councilor McCoy, Councilor Smith. and Counselor Ziegler, any of us also can join in. But to start with, I would start with Counselor Hayes.
Okay.
And so we can start narrowing down what the issues are and start addressing them.
All right,
But
it's basically, we're just being told to go here, and then they say no, and so we just need to know where to focus. So it sounds like a great where to start.
great.
Thank
You for your time.
Thank you.
Does anyone else here from the council would like to address from the public would like to address the council on something other than what's on the public hearing? Please come forward. Okay, I don't see anything, so we'll move to standing committees. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't see at the top of the meeting yet. Mayor correspondence, Mayor Cadger. Okay, no communications from the mayor. We have no communications or correspondence for the city council. So now we're at standing committees, Rules and Government Relations, Councilor Rist.
I have no report other than the administrative code change that's up for public hearing, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Finance, Councilor Hagan.
Yes, we have 5 public hearings on supplemental appropriations tonight, and also a bonding and borrowing request, which will pretty much clear our current agenda. But we do have a couple of new items, which I can take up at new items, or can do them right now, whatever is the pleasure of the chair.
You can do the new items right now, that'd be great.
Okay. The 2 new items of business, the first is and I'll do a first reading, is a supplemental appropriation dated June 11th, 2015. The amount requested is $20,479 to be appropriated from the CPA undesignated fund, in that amount, $20,479, and appropriated to the Center Pepin School Playground. In that amount, the amounts requested to be used for the following purpose: to fund recreational improvements to the Center Pepin School Playground. And since they're different, one's an interdepartmental transfer, I would also, I'll make a motion that be sent to finance for review.
Okay, a motion and a second to send, is it just a supplemental appropriation? Is that what that motion is?
Yes.
Okay. Supplemental appropriation of $20,479 to finance for additional review and additional comments. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And I would also like to set a public hearing for this matter for our first meeting in July, which would be July 8th, I believe.
Okay.
And I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Is there a second to that? A motion and a second to set a public hearing July 8th for the $20,479 supplemental appropriation.
Our second new business item under finance is an interdepartmental transfer. It's also dated June 11th, 2015. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $75,000 to be transferred from the Chapter 32B insurance in that amount, and transferred to the following: Fire Department overtime personnel services, $70,000, and Building Inspector personal services, $5,000, for a total of $75,000. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for a shortfall in the fire and building inspector's personnel services. And I'll make that in the form of a motion on this interdepartmental transfer.
We have a motion and a second to move the interdepartmental transfer of $75,000 to finance. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And I'd also like to make a second motion to move that to a public hearing also on our next meeting, first meeting in July, which would be July 8th. And I'll make that in the
Okay, a
motion.
motion and a second to set a public hearing for that same interdepartmental transfer on July 8th. Any additional discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And our next meeting of the subcommittee will be next Wednesday, the 24th, in Room 1 at 6 p.m. And that concludes finance tonight,
Great, thank you.
till the public hearings.
Right. Public Safety, Councilor Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we have a request for street acceptance for the Paul Street extension, and when we went back through the notes, we just have a lot of questions. There were apparently some waivers through the planning board, so we've sent an email asking what exactly those waivers were. There's some questions about a street light that was put in, but the one that's there actually looks more like a lamp post than a street light, so I'm not quite sure what the specs are, so we're following up on that. And there also seem to be a couple of lots that are still for sale, so we're wondering how much, you know, the road seems like in a state of flux rather than ready for acceptance. So we're trying to get answers to all of that, and that's moving forward. The street acceptance protocol is going to planning this week, and we had a request to amend the traffic rules and orders for a stop sign at Spring Street at Chestnut Street. We had a request from a woman in the neighborhood, and we also had a letter from the chief of police who went out and looked at it, and he agreed that there probably should be a street sign there, and we all went and looked at it. So we're going to put together a proposal to amend the traffic rules and orders and try and get a stop sign out there. And we'll have a public hearing. So we'll set the public hearing for, is it July 8th?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Motion, Jen?
And I will say that in the form of a motion.
Second. Okay, motion and a second to set a public hearing on July 8th for the
Stop sign at Spring and Chestnut Street.
Any additional questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Thus concludes.
Thank you. Appointments, Counselor Smith, would you like to cover appointments?
Under new business.
Yeah.
No, I'm just, no, actually, yeah, you could.
Okay. Let's see.
That's what I was going to do.
The appointment subcommittee met last Wednesday at 6 o'clock to review the procedures for electing the next principal, hiring the next principal assessor. And so we will be conducting interviews tomorrow at 5:30 in conference room 2.
Maybe downstairs.
Oh, conference room 1.
Downstairs, conference room one. Okay, great. And no other appointments, so that concludes?
That concludes.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance, Counselor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are going to meet next Wednesday, the 24th at 6 p.m. In one of the downstairs meeting rooms. And we're going to look at everything that we have on our agenda. Try to get some stuff done before the summer.
Okay, and I hate to make it worse for you, but there's actually new business on a new telephone pole. That goes to public safety.
That goes to public
That's,
safety.
I was going to do it under new
Yeah.
business, but
Yeah, since we're going through new business now, why don't we do
That concludes
then?
my report.
Thank you. So Counselor Hayes, my mistake, if you want to move this poll
To
right
public
now,
safety.
then, yeah, just, I guess, state in the motion.
motion to move the new poll location to public safety.
Okay.
Second.
Is there a second? Motion is second to move the request for a new telephone pole location to public safety. Any additional comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. So I believe we have gone through, well, business, no business, standing committees. So I will accept a motion to open public hearings.
So moved.
Second.
A motion is second to open public hearings. All those in favor? Aye. Abstain? No? Okay, motion passes. So I guess our first one we're going to have tonight is Administrative Code, Counselor Rist.
Yes, the Rules and Government Relations Committee met and approved the administrative code change as requested by the mayor. We asked for a couple of amendments, the word fair being added to the name, making the name the East Hampton Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership, and an extension of the mission to include a resource for tenants and landlords advocacy for fair housing laws and complaints. This evening on your desk, you will find a new Administrative Code 15.3 language, which must be submitted by the mayor. This demonstrates that the mayor approves of this amendment because by charter, the council is not allowed to amend an administrative code change. It is only allowed to approve or disapprove of it. So by asking the mayor to formally send us the new language, we are demonstrating that the mayor has approved and amended her own request. So this is in front of you, and I'll ask if there's anyone, the mayor or anyone would like to speak to this evening.
Thank you. As Councilor Riss explained, this is a new administrative code, not an amended one. After having information from Jana Tetra and Jackie Brousseau-Perrier, they have requested the additional changes to the administrative code for the fair housing and the merger. So I put forth that language as a new administrative code.
Okay.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the council concerning this administrative code? Okay, Counselor Rist.
Just to confirm, we are combining two committees, the Housing Partnership and the Fair Housing Committee, making one committee, again, in an attempt to be more efficient and to allow the committee to meet more often or to meet at all with less membership. Then I therefore move to accept the request for the Administrative Code 15.3 as presented this evening and as vetted by the Rules and Government Relations Committee.
Second.
Okay, well, motion a second to approve the Administrative Code 15-3 as amended by the mayor. Any additional comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
That concludes.
That concludes. Number 2, Counselor Hagan.
Our second public hearing tonight is a little out of order on the agenda. We're going to move to number C, borrowing and bonding. This is a request by the mayor for authorization to borrow $1 million for the purpose of paying for the cost of a feasibility study. It is not an appropriation of $1 million, it's just the authorization that the mayor would be able to give a building committee to borrow the money if we went forward in the process. We're in the process of applying to the Mass School Building Authority, and I guess I would call up the mayor or the superintendent, whichever wants to come up and
So as you stated, this is a bonding borrowing request. This is something that is required by MSBA to have the funding in place. We are only, as you know, we have just been invited into the eligibility period. That's where we are now. So in order to move forward, we would have to have all the, this vote with the bonding in place for the feasibility study and the schematic design. That does not mean that when, the bonding, if the bonding and borrowing authority are approved, it does not mean that we only borrow or bond what we need. It doesn't mean we would, end up with the whole $1 million. So we only borrow or bond what we need at the time. And I know that Superintendent Follansbee would like to say a few words.
Okay. Mayor Kedge, if you might stay and just wait, because I'm going to ask the councilors in case, sometime you can come up, but just in case councilors have questions for either of you while you're right there.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you this evening. I really am here to explain the process a little bit more. We did a statement of interest for one of our schools. The School Building Authority requires us to choose one school for a statement of interest, and we chose Maple School. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't do something different as the project goes along. We were very excited when we were brought into the eligibility period. I've done statements of interest every year I've been a superintendent, and this is the first year that we were brought in by the MSBA for the eligibility module of their program and procedures. As Mayor Cadger explained to you, this vote doesn't is a requirement of the eligibility period and something that we have to do in order to go forward. If we don't meet all of the requirements of the eligibility period, then they close out us as being in the pipeline for any kind of building project, and we would go back to square one, where we would have to wait another year and do a statement of interest and see if they would bring us back in. There were a number of other requirements that we've had to meet and we're still working on as well. As you know, our elementary schools are over 100 years old. White Brook Middle School is sinking into the ground and was an open classroom design when it was built back in the early 1970s. We have the original orange carpet in several areas of the school building. So we are really in great need of new facilities, or at least a consideration by the community of new facilities. Our new high school has been such an asset to us as a school department and to our entire community. Our high school had a level 3 accountability, and this year went from level 3 to level 1 accountability level in the state, which is the highest level possible. We're very proud of that, and we believe that it is in part due to the new facilities and the modern technology that we have that help prepare our students for a 21st century life of career or college or whatever their future plans might be. We don't have these same facilities in our elementary schools or our middle school. And it is very difficult for us to provide the kind of education we want for our students to be ready to be productive citizens in the 21st century. Just the importance of this today, also this vote today, is to do it in a timely manner, because when we went in to the School Building Authority back in March in Boston, they explained to us that they would set out a timeline for us, but if we could accomplish the timeline in a more expedient way than the dates that they had set out for us, then we could move ahead in the project in a more expedient way. And I am here tonight to respectfully ask you to approve this vote so that we can move ahead in this project to the next module, which is the feasibility study. The fact that this vote occurs and the fact that we have met all of the other criteria of the eligibility period does not guarantee us entry into the feasibility module. It simply shows them that we have met the requirements that they've asked us to meet, and then we would have to go in front of the board again to request entrance into the next module of the process, which is the feasibility module. So, obviously, as superintendent of schools, I'm very eager to move forward in this process for our students and for our community, with the knowledge that the community will weigh in ultimately on whether a project goes forward or not. What I do want to make clear to you is that the Maple Elementary School is listed, as I said, because we had to list one school. But the feasibility study would allow us to look at many different configurations. Would it be one new elementary school? Would it be for all, that would encompass all of our schools? Would it be just a simple renovation of Maple School? Or could it be a combination of the middle school and the elementary school? We've talked with MSBA about would they consider us putting forth a project for a K-8, which would, in many ways, support what our parents want. Our middle school parents want a new middle school. Our elementary parents want a new elementary school or elementary schools. The feasibility stage would help us look at all possibilities, and then it would be the community that would make the ultimate decision about how we went forward. So, again, I respectfully ask that you approve this vote this evening so we can move forward as expediently as possible.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions for the mayor or the superintendent? Councilor Rist.
As you explained to us at the Finance Committee meeting, could you let the public know about the reimbursement that this, if this is eventually approved and we are gaining reimbursement, this will be eligible for reimbursement up to a certain percentage, like the high school was 63, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if the mayor wants to, or Melissa wants to speak to this, but absolutely, the entire project, the feasibility stage would be eligible for this reimbursement. But we have to be brought in, and we have to meet these requirements before we can be brought in. And I don't know if Melissa would like.
Thank you.
We're not in the approval stage yet, so if we were entered into the approval and accepted into the project and accepted into the phase, then the funds that we would have expended at that point in time would be subject to the reimbursement, but not in this stage.
Any additional questions for either the mayor or the superintendent? No, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Let me go with the public. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, anyone from the public who would like to address the council concerning this appropriation, please come to your, go to the podium, please. State your name and address. Just for
Matthew Leber, 25 Highland Avenue. My question is, do you have somebody in mind already to do the feasibility study, or does it go out for a request for proposal, or what's the procedure for going from here once it's approved?
Mayor Cadger, can you answer that question, or the superintendent? Can either of you answer that question?
Do we have somebody on?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Lieber, could you repeat the question, I think?
I'm sorry.
The question was whether there, do you have somebody in mind for a feasibility study?
No,
we go out to a request for proposals?
Exactly that. We would have to go out for request for proposals, and no, we don't have anybody in mind, and we would follow the process.
Thank you. Councilor Hayes.
Well, there is a board that's put together that's made up of citizens from East Hampton, and I think there's still positions available to, that the mayor appoints to.
I'm sorry, Jennifer, you said something about a board?
The school building committee.
School building
Oh,
committee?
you're talking about the school
Yeah.
building committee? Right, but the feasibility study, what he was asking is if we have, anybody in mind that would do that, the architect, the designer?
Oh, no,
The
I
answer to that-
understood his question
Oh,
just
okay.
fine. I'm just saying that there is an opportunity for people from the community to be involved in this process.
Oh,
That's all.
To be involved in the school building committee?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that was one of the things we were talking about, and I know that Tamara was going to bring that up at the last PTO meeting to make sure that people, even though we put 13 people forward, that was the deadline we had to meet for the Massachusetts School Building Authority to have the committee in place, which is in place, but it's great to have, future people apply. The commitment is, it's a very long commitment. You'd have to be available for the construction meetings on a weekly basis. And we will be meeting if and when we're approved. and, but it's always nice to have additional people that we could put forward. All of the ones that I had received at the deadline were put forward, and they were, most of the spots were required by MSBA. So it's, but again, there might be people that might have, might not be able to keep the commitment, and it's always nice to have I think we could certainly put forth a few new ones in the future.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Okay. Anyone else from the public who would like to address the council concerning this authorization? No. Okay, Councilor Hagan.
Okay, bear with me on this one. I'll make the following motion. I move that the city appropriates the amount of $1 million for the purpose of paying cost of a feasibility study to study potential solutions to problems identified at the Maple Elementary School located at 7 Chapel Street, East Hampton, Mass., which may involve new construction, renovation, addition, and/or consolidation of Maple Elementary School with other schools in the districts, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, and for which the city may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Said amount to be expended under the direction of the School Building Committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The city acknowledges that the Mass School Building Authority's grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any costs the city incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the city, and that the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the feasibility study agreement that may be executed between the city and the MSBA.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, for the appropriation of the $1 million authorization bonding borrowing. Any additional comments, questions concerning what we heard? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Okay, so we are moving on to zoning ordinance amendments. Councilor Derby.
Okay. So what we have in front of us tonight is a citizen brought amendment to the zoning to consider building size restrictions for buildings over 50,000 square feet, which could also be known as big box stores. And as I'll let the petitioners discuss, the impetus for them bringing it forward. I just want to talk briefly about the process.
Just for 1 second, I've recused myself on this matter, so I'm going to step down until the matter's over.
Okay. And so the process that we went through with the planning board, I just want to acknowledge the fact, and with the petitioners, was a really collaborative process. At the beginning, what was brought forward, some people in the community had some issues with it. When we had our joint public hearings with the planning board, those issues were aired. We found common ground, and the petitioners changed some of the language. The planning board worked with us, and we tried to find something that would work for East Hampton. And so I just want to acknowledge that process and how collaborative it was, and the fact that even though we had varying levels of investment in the actual language of trying to prevent something 50,000 square feet or above, we were all able to find a really common ground that I think at the end gave us something that was really good. So I just wanted to start with that, and then I'd be happy to open it up to.
Okay, if the petitioners want to just summarize, your maybe the reason why, and.
Sure. My name is Dan Hagan, and I'm one of two drafters of the original proposal that was put forward, the other being Dave Gardner. And at least the reasoning behind my getting involved in being part of this goes back to the master plan. And our master plan is pretty specific about the citizens' desires in the community. And it's expressed through the survey that's part of the master plan that was used to compile it. And in that survey, over 3,300 people took part in that. So it was a pretty significant turnout for East Hampton residents. And just to give you some ideas of kind of what drove me to develop this, was that there was a high priority placed. In fact, 60% of those respondents placed a very high priority on maintaining the character of our city and the existing neighborhoods. At the time, 70% thought we were developing way too fast in the city. But the real clincher for me was looking at one of the survey responses, which said that out of 14 priorities they asked the citizens to rank, and out of those 14, they asked them to rank them based on future economic success that they thought should be prioritized for how can we move forward in the future. And of all of 14, a major retail shopping center received was placed in the lowest category of priority. In fact, 40% of the residents out of all 14 chose that as the absolute lowest priority on their list. So I think that really told us where the public was. On top of the fact there's a lot of good reasons to stop big box development. We won't go into all of them. Obviously, I think there's a lot, but just to give you a few reasons, first of all, we've done a very good job here in East Hampton of supporting small local business growth. We've done a nice job on Cottage Streets and Union Street of fostering that, and we want to continue that. I think to allow a big box store to come in here and move our economic center away from our downtown presents a threat. There's also, I think, some very good support for not having big box stores because of the sustainability factor of those stores. They're built so that if a primary retailer leaves, then how do you reuse the building? You have a 100,000 square foot store. What can go in there? I mean, in East Hampton right now, our biggest commercialized store, other than our factory buildings, is the medical building down on Northampton Street. That building is about 31,000 square feet. So if we had a very large store, how do we repurpose that? Even the permitted Stop and Shop would not be over the 50,000 square foot cap. That would only be in the mid 40s. So even that would fall underneath the cap. So I guess the question is, do we want to go bigger than a Stop and Shop? Do we want to go bigger than anything we have existing right now by a substantial margin? Since we originally proposed this, there has been some changes, as Salem said, and I think the process is something worth noting. It was a very collaborative process. It was well done, and I give a lot of credit to Jessica Allen for being able to help bridge the gap between both parties, kind of all sides of this. And we did make some reforms to the original proposal. This proposal now that's in front of you only applies to retail buildings and only in business districts. So we would not, the industrial district is not impacted, and so only business zones. On top of putting a limitation, we've also rolled back the limitations. There are certain in our zoning ordinance, there are certain minimum lot acres required for business developments. And so, for example, if you want to put a planned business development in all businesses, that requires 5 acres of land minimum to build. So by nature, you're going to build larger. And so what we've done is asked, as part of this zoning package, to lower those minimum acreage requirements in order to promote smaller businesses, so that smaller businesses will want to come in. We'll have smaller shopping centers in the city and encourage that kind of growth. So this is not just a limitation, but also lowering some limitations. Again, the process is good. I'm glad to see that I think we have really a compromise solution that's been agreeable to most everyone. Certainly that's spoken out for the most part has been supportive of this latest draft. And the only other thing I guess I would add is just there was some desire during the process to allow for standalone convenience stores and gas stations, which are small business entities. And that is another part of this proposal where we originally, or in our current zoning ordinance, if you want to have a convenience store or a gas station, you have to build it as part of a business development. It cannot be standalone in the Highway Business District. And if you do, it can only be 20% of the overall development. So in other words, you'd have to both have 5 acres of land and be only 20% of a much larger development. And so when we, considered this with both the planning board and the ordinance committee. They had suggested, along with us, that we eliminate that we actually remove convenience stores and gas stations from the requirement of being part of a larger business development. And that goes along with this package. Salem, you might be able to speak more to that later. But anyways, I encourage you to pass it. I think it's very positive for the city and will help move us forward. So thank you.
I guess for continuity's sake, Mr. Gardner, do you want to speak to it, or is just what Mr. Hagan said enough for now?
That's a good question. In an effort to save time, Dan covered it very well. There's nothing I would add to that except to point out that the definition, even though it's part of this proposal, the new definition concerning gross floor area applies to all zones. So all zones and all building types benefit from that new dimension of gross floor area being measured inside, not outside, outside.
Okay. There may very well be questions coming up. So, Councilor, can I go to the public? Okay. So if there's anyone from the public who would like to address the council concerning this zoning amendment, please come to the podium and state your name and address.
Good evening, David Boyle, 146 Holyoke Street. I hope to be brief, not babble, but I do have 3 points. At the first public hearing, I spoke strongly against the original proposal. However, I am very happy and in favor of the proposal as written tonight, and I have no suggestions. So I'm in favor of it. I hope it's 7-0. Number 2, I think a lot of you are aware of a committee that Dave and I serve on, EDIC, and we're having some struggles. But in our struggles, we have had some quote-unquote private conversations, and we seem to be in agreement with the proposal. The chairperson, Josh Rosenblatt, has done a very good job of trying to foster as much conversation as reasonably possible. So we have vetted it to a certain degree, unofficially. And then lastly, I guess Salem started it, Dan echoed it, and I'll echo it one more time. I am very appreciative of the process. I think Karen, Jessica, Salem, and Jesse provided an atmosphere that made this issue a lot less contentious than it would have been 3 or 4 years ago, or just could have been. And I am very grateful for that, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the council concerning this? The council, Mayor,
I don't think anybody has missed the difference in how this ordinance has been presented. Typically, you would have 2 very heated sides when any ordinance change is presented. And, bless you. And the amount of work done by the planning board, the ordinance subcommittee, the city planner, but I think what's very unique in this is that both the pros and cons have conceded and made concessions, and everybody pretty much is under an agreement, which I think is pretty incredible and something that you would probably typically have expected to be a very hot issue. So I just want to commend everybody, and that's how things are done. It's a typical, wonderful public process. A lot of time was spent in public meetings and public discussions, and I just think that it's very commendable, and that's why East Hampton is the community it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public who would like to address the council concerning this zoning change? Okay, not seeing.
Quick question.
Sure.
If we're done with the...
Yeah.
I heard Mr. Hagan say that gas stations, auto service stations with a convenience store was included.
You don't mind coming up to the podium.
In my copy before me, I don't see that reference. I think I'm referring to sections 21 and 22 of the ordinance, and I only have section 1, convenience market.
It's crossed out. I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So this was one of the thing. Now, so originally, if you look at the convenience market standards and conditions, which is number 1,
Yes.
which is in your packet, that originally that was the one that we focused in on. It was an oversight when we realized that we missed that it was addressed somewhere else in the table. So it was a miss on our, and then when we realized it, we went back to it, and we met in committee, discussed it, realized it was the spirit of what we were trying to do. It just didn't make it into this packet. So it has been vetted by the committee and voted on from the ordinance subcommittee.
So let me just refresh, see if I understand. That the automotive service station section would be removed from the plan, as part of the planned business development, and the automotive service station with convenience market is removed.
Yeah, so in
those
21,
removed, 21.
the wording of in highway business district automotive service stations only permitted in planned business developments would be stricken.
Right.
And then in 22, that same language would be also stricken.
Okay.
So it's removing the same language we moved from 21. It's just in two other places that we didn't find it before.
Okay.
So your motion...
And I'm going to do that as an amendment, just because, since it's not in what's in front of you tonight.
Okay.
Just-
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Hagan.
All right.
Thank you. After all. I'm sorry, more questions? Okay.
No more.
Do you have something that you want to say? Because I just wanted to state a couple more things, just so people had some clarity. We also included exemptions in this. And so, for example, solar fields are exempted from the ordinance. Schools are exempted. The mills are exempted. And so that was just something that, we tried to look at how this could potentially affect all of the areas and make sure that there isn't anything that we didn't foresee. We really tried to make sure that we weren't going to miss anything other than that language. So we're focusing too hard on the other stuff. So
Great. I had a question about one of the acreage requirements, and I don't know, I think I'd like to have the public weigh in on that. I'm not sure if that's how we would do this.
So, I mean, if you have a question about the acreage, maybe either Councilor, Mr. Hagan or Councilor Derby can respond. Mr. Hagan, I'm sorry.
Mr. Hagan and Mr. Boyle may want to weigh in on this, I'm not sure. In reviewing this, it certainly seemed to me that there was discussion about setting a small cap, a cap limit, and that we would see ourselves as a smaller community and not want to have a large-scale development. That's not how we see East Hampton. But there also seemed to be a concern to try to move, to open up business opportunities for small businesses. And I noticed that we're talking about going from a 5-acre planned business development to a 3-acre planned business development. I did have a conversation with Jessica Allen this week, our city planner, and she had indicated to me that it might be possible even to go to 2.5 acres rather than 3. And her thinking was, maybe not all types of uses would meet all the requirements because of stormwater and other requirements that would have to be met. But I wanted to be sure before, I certainly was open to making as many different possibilities possible for East Hampton small businesses and businesses from outside our area, outside our state, who might want to be here. Is there any thoughts that you would have on that subject in terms of your discussions and how that might?
Yeah, I can tell you a couple things. One is how it kind of came up in our discussions at the joint hearing. The joint hearing looked at these, and at one point we talked about lowering it to 2 acres or more. The joint committee, though, set it back at 3, set it back to our original proposal, 3 acres. We had sort of just, we picked that. It wasn't really with a lot of science to it. It just wanted to lower the acreage so that small businesses could come in or smaller developments could come in. You have to understand that these are for business developments. The minimum acreage is for business development. So you're typically talking more than one business. That's what the acreage applies to. I don't personally have a problem with lowering acreage more. You can only put so much on a lot anyways while observing setbacks and all of the other parking requirements and lot area coverage and all of that. So there's only so much you can put on a parcel anyways. I personally don't really have much concern about that. The way it came up in the committee, however, and what the committee said was they wanted to keep some minimums like we have, but allow for the real sort of real odd example, which was the gas station convenience stores, which would not be allowed to be built standalone. And so that you had to make that part of a larger development. So you couldn't just do that as itself. You had to put it with other businesses. And in fact, it could only be 20% of the overall development. So that's really where the committee went to in that respect. I hear what Jessica's saying, that you might want to consider it for certain uses and not others. So at least for the use of the convenience stores and gas stations, that's going to be, assuming if this passes, that would be exempt now, so that you could build a standalone gas station or convenience store or combination in the highway business district without running into lot minimums. But in terms of acreage requirements, like I said, I personally, if they were reduced or eliminated, I wouldn't really have much of a problem with that. But that was where everything was left with the committee, was to eliminate the convenience market, but still have some acreage requirements. So.
Not to add too much, but just in general, the idea behind a planned business development, putting uses aside, is to have more than one building on a lot. So, maybe have one curb cut and 2 or 3 buildings. And so, 2.5 acres might be fine. If you look at our 2 buildings on the address of 247, 251 Northampton Street, right across from the bank and across from the dentist at that corner of O'Neill Street, the usable, the covered area is about 2.5 acres. Our lot is 5 acres, but there's wetlands and a steep slope. But I would rather have 3 acres in all uses than try to start figuring out what uses might work with 2.5 acres and what uses would work with 3 acres. That's just my own gut.
So, what we're talking about here is, though, lowering the standard to 2.5 and above.
Oh yeah, 2.5 is the minimum, or 3, whatever you decide on. But it's 5 now, and I think 5, is a little strong. I think 3 is great. 2.5, from my gut, without having a planner, professional planner give me some, but I can't see you getting 3 buildings and complying with stormwater management and parking on 2.5 acres. Of course, you can make your building smaller, but why not make one larger building? So it's 6 of one and half dozen the other in a way.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for the public council?
I had a question. So this is just a draft? We don't have a, because mine says draft. And you said there's amendments and corrections, and there's a lot of crossing out.
No, this is, what you have is the only thing that's, the only thing that needs to, there's just one table that's missing. And that's the amendment. Just because there's the rest of this table didn't get included. And it's 21 and 22.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But this is the final.
And this was
Final
discussed at subcommittee and then also with the EDIC?
This was discussed in multiple subcommittee meetings. It was discussed in multiple joint public hearings with the planning board.
And do we have any, letters of recommendation from any of those committees, or?
Yep. The planning board voted all 4-0 in favor.
Great. And the EDIC?
Well, they're not a voting body right now. But Mr.
they
Boyle
have a
seemed to say that
notes
they
or-
were,
We maybe would have if we could have.
yeah, they would have if could have. At least that's the feeling I got from Mr. Boyle.
enough members.
Yeah.
They were in support.
They didn't have a quorum, so they weren't official meetings, so they have no official agenda, they have no official opinion. So it's just, again, hopefully that executive administrative code will make that easier for that committee.
And this did come out of the ordinance subcommittee 3-0.
Okay, any additional questions or comments for either the public or city officials?
I have one more question, which I had asked earlier, that there is it doesn't address anything about there being a fiscal responsibility, because that's already on the books for us. Jessica had answered that for us. Could you explain that to me one more time, that we're not asking for anybody who's going, we don't have a financial aspect to any of the criteria for doing a new building? as far as like tax revenue or how it would impact employment downtown versus,
So an impact statement.
correct?
Okay.
The financial impact.
Well, I believe, as it stands right now, building projects over, the threshold is escaping me, I think it's, 25,000 square feet, are required to do, and the city council passed this, I was, must have been 5 or 6 years ago, a financial impact statement, and have a higher level of information above and beyond the special permit process, in order to inform the community and the planning board what the potential impact of their building would be.
Great.
So that's already on the books.
Thank you.
I'll answer.
Any additional questions? Concerns? Anyone else from the public? Last chance to talk about the zoning ordinance change. Okay, Counselor.
Okay, so I move to amend the East Hampton zoning ordinance for building size, including amendments to Table 5.1 and Table 6.1, as specified in the document presented to the City Council from the Planning Board dated May 7th, 2015.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. President.
Counselor Rist.
Do you need to include an amendment to this current? We made the motion, so do you want
So
to include an
now
amendment?
the amendment comes in. Okay. So I would like to move to amend by striking the wording, "In the Highway Business District, automotive service stations are only permitted in planned business developments," in Table 5.1, Section 21 and 22.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for that amendment to the main motion, which is still pending. Any discussion on that amendment? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstain, motion passes. Amendment passes.
To
No.
make an amendment?
You want to make another amendment?
I would move that we go from 3 acres minimum in the planned business development to 2.5 acres.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion, Counselor Rist?
I have no real objection to the amendment, except that I was going to say to the full amendment that I appreciated greatly the collaborative process, but also the work of a professional planner in Jessica Allen. I know for a fact that a lot of the recommendations on exemptions, for instance, after she vetted this with the people that presented it and with the committee, she made a lot of discussion, researched all of the issues surrounding this, and her professional opinion means a lot to me. In fact, I was going to ask her, you certainly approve of this, and I trust Counselor Derby in the fact that he said she certainly does. In fact, it's got her stamp of approval and her fingerprints are all over it. So, to your amendment, I would ask that we not approve it, only because I want to hear from her on the impact of that. I know you've talked to her, but I haven't, and I'd rather see this council get good information. I know it's an acre and it reduces minimums, and someone could still go 3 or 4 acres if they wanted to build a larger business development. But I'd rather not do an amendment to such an important document without the planner giving us full information on it. So I can't vote for this, not because I don't trust your judgment or appreciate where you're going. I'd like to hear from the planner on it before I voted for that. So that's my opinion.
I can appreciate, if I may, I can certainly appreciate that perspective, and I felt the same way. That's why I did speak with Jessica.
But I didn't.
Oh, yeah, I understand. And
If she was
go over the various aspects, and as I would relate her conversation, she said, no, I think we arrived at 3, she said, because it seemed that most, it usually would work under those circumstances. But she said, I certainly can see that it would work, especially with the parking requirements. Let's say you were to have a smaller parking requirements given certain uses. And she said, well, 2.5 would give us expanded capacity. And I think our object here is to have as much expansion as we can as we lower our cap for large to give us as much expansion possibilities on the lower end. That's why I'm making the proposal. That's why I talked to her about that. I think that's important for our city to do.
Okay. Counselor Derby, do you have some?
I'm not opposed to this because I think, from my perspective and everything that we've done, the development is going to be developed, with all these different restrictions and regulations. So they're gonna, if they have 2.5 acres or 3 acres, a lot of that is going to be how they build in that space is going to be restricted by parking and setbacks and all of those things. So I think what Mr. Boyle said was right. I don't necessarily want to get into different restrictions. I think, us looking at the minimum lot size is good. And I really don't see a huge difference between 2.5 and 3. We didn't have a scientific method for choosing 3. We just felt that it made more sense than 5. And so, I don't necessarily think there's any strong rationale for this, but I'm not against it.
Councilor Rist?
Just want to ask, do you feel the planning board would go along with this change based on your conversations with them and in the meetings? Do we need to bring it to them? That's legally, I don't think.
It's hard. I would
don't think
not
you have to, but-
I would not presume to speak for the planning board. However, I think this is, out of all of the things, this is a relatively minor change.
Issue. Okay.
But I would defer to my fellow councilors, and Joe was at one of the meetings.
Yeah, I think most of us do. I really don't have any objection to it. I just a little more conservative about feeling that what we presented was approved by the city planner. It sounds verbally that like she would be okay with it, and I think we can always amend this in the future, but if we pass something that may be too, I guess you could argue we could always amend it higher. But I'm going to just stay, for consistency's sake, with what I know the planner and the joint committee has approved, is what thinking this is always can be changed if need be. Councilor Smith.
I would agree that this has been a very transparent process with a lot of input from a lot of people and a lot of different committees, and I've really appreciated that process. So making an amendment to the size at this moment, at the very last minute, I'm very hesitant to do that. I think it could really backtrack a lot of the communication that has really been worked on between a lot of different groups. So I'm in agreement that I would rather move more slowly with this and have more opportunities for input than very quick change at this juncture.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, why don't we call the vote then? So again, this is a motion second, so it's in favor of Councilor Kwasinski's amendment. So all those in favor? Opposed? Nay? Whatever.
Did you say no? I said aye.
Okay. You were a yes? Okay. So that still does not pass. Okay.
Original motion.
So now we're back to our original motion, which was as amended. Thank you, as amended. So there was a motion, a second. So any other additional discussions concerning the broader zoning ordinance? Okay, I guess not. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion passes.
Good work.
Yeah, let me just say again, can I say what everyone has done? You guys did, the whole city did an outstanding job coming together, and the citizens as well. Thank you for all your hard work on that.
Very good.
Okay, so now Councilor Hagan can come back.
Where is he?
Where'd he go?
He just wanted to make a big entrance.
And he's up too.
Okay. Back to public hearings, B, which is our fourth one tonight, our supplemental appropriations. Let me just get my paperwork here. The first item, and I'll do a second reading on this, is a supplemental appropriation dated May 14th, 2015. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $50,000 to be appropriated from the enterprise retained earnings, and that amount and appropriated to the wastewater treatment, excuse me. Hang on, I think can we go back? I'm looking for the water. Yeah, I got it. No. Again, this is May 14th, 2015, the second reading on the supplemental appropriation. Amount requested is $50,000 to be appropriated from retained earnings, and that amount $50,000, but appropriated to the water meters capital in that amount $50,000. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for the purchase of water meters. I know Director Pipchinsky's here on all these items. This has been an ongoing appropriation we've done several years, which is to bring all our water meters up to radio control. I believe this would bring us about 1,500, slightly under 1,500 that wouldn't be once these about 250 would be appropriated. Every year, we make a little more, and it helps out in time for people to read it, but if Mr. Pipchinsky or Office Manager Patty Cotton wants to speak.
Good evening. We have about 5,700 meters, and approximately 1,800 of them don't have radios. Every year, we replace about 200. This is our cash. We have 3.5 million that we bill. It's all because of the meters and what they read, so they need to be accurate.
Any questions for Councilor
I believe you said at the committee meeting, Patty, that, or Joe said that this does help the residents, and that when these meters are put in, they're improving the efficiency of the metering, therefore potentially saving them money, or something like that, in the sense that there's more accuracy. Was that true? That doesn't sound right.
They're very accurate. The
I know,
older
as
ones
opposed
slow
to the old
down.
ones.
The older ones slow down. So what happens is they're not as accurate, so they don't bill as much. So I don't know if that's saving them money.
more accurate than the city.
So that's not quite. Meters slow down.
Sorry, I put
So,
you on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I misunderstood that.
Any additional questions for the? Amazing. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
If anyone from the public who would like to address the council concerning this appropriation, please feel free to come to the podium. Okay, now being seen, Councilor Hagan.
I'll make the following motion, if there's no other questions, that the full city council approve the following appropriation of $50,000 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings in that amount to water meter capital for the purpose of purchasing water meters.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second for the $50,000 supplemental appropriation for the purchase of water meters. Any additional questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Second supplemental appropriation public hearing is also a supplemental appropriation. I'll do a second reading of May 14th. Amount requested is $50,000 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings, and that amount $50,000 and appropriated to the wastewater treatment pump station upgrades capital, $50,000. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for repair and upgrades to the sewer pump station. I believe this will involve upgrades to 3 different areas. There'll be Daly Field, Adams Street, and Pomeroy Street, but again, I guess Mr. Pipchinsky can speak to this particular matter.
Good evening, Joe Pipchinsky, I'm the Director of Public Works. Councilor Hagan is absolutely right. The 3 pump stations that he mentioned, those are the 3 that we'll be dealing with this year. We have 18 pump stations in town to pump waste to ultimately get it to the wastewater treatment plant. And according to our wastewater treatment plant discharge permit that's regulated by EPA and DEP, we're required under that permit to keep these stations in good repair. And if that means replacing the motor control panels or actually replacing pumps, that's something we have to do.
Okay. Any questions for the director of these pumps? No? Okay, thank you. Anyone from the public who would like to address the council concerning this appropriation? Okay, not being seen, Councilor Hagan.
I'll make the following motion that the East Hampton City Council approve the request for a supplemental appropriation amount of $50,000 from retained earnings for the wastewater treatment pump station upgrades.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for a supplemental appropriation of $50,000 for the pump station upgrades. Additional comments or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained? Motion passes.
Our third supplemental appropriation tonight is dated May 14th. Also, we'll do a second reading. Supplemental appropriation request is for $60,000 to be appropriated from the enterprise retained earnings in that amount and appropriated to the water skid steer loader capital in the amount of $60,000. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for the purchase of a skid steer loader. I believe this would be one that we have currently a 2004 that is used by the water department. That would move over, I believe, to your documentation says that they were going to sell it, but I believe the new plan by Mr. Pipchinsky is to move that one over to wastewater treatment, so we'd have a backup, even though it is 11 years or 10 years old, and it's used to break frost during the winter, both for water pipes, and this would also be for the wastewater. But if you want to comment more on it.
Yeah, the one we have now is 10 years old. It's a vital piece of equipment during emergency water breaks, sewer breaks, especially in the wintertime. And we need something really dependable. This will ultimately go down to the wastewater treatment plant. It can be used with forks to unload their trucks with pipes and everything and clean up snow during the winter. It'll still be used, but it won't get the heavy use that it gets now on the streets with the water and sewer department.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the Director of Public Works? Well, I'm going to see Councilor Hagan.
I'll make the following motion that the East Hampton City Council approve a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $60,000 that it be appropriated from retained earnings and appropriated to the water skid steer loader capital to be used for skid steer loader.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the supplemental appropriation of $60,000 for the wood skid steer loader. Additional questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Our fourth item tonight is a supplemental appropriation dated May 14th. Request is hereby made to second reading of the following appropriation. Amount requested is $125,000 appropriated from enterprise retained earnings in that amount and appropriated to the water mini excavator capital in the amount of $125,000. Amount request be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for the purchase of a small excavator. Again, this, I believe, is, for people, this is a little narrower excavator than we have. We have a couple of larger ones, and this would be a smaller, which would be a little more efficient, and, but go ahead.
In the enterprise, we have two backhoes, one in the water and one in sewer, rubber-tired tractor backhoes. But a lot of times we get into the neighborhoods with sidewalks on both sides and snowbanks, and it's hard to maneuver that piece of equipment around while you're trying to work on the water pipes. So this will give the water and sewer departments a little more flexibility. When they need a smaller machine, they'll have a smaller machine. The machine that they have now will be sent down to the highway department to replace a 1995 backhoe that's 20 years old. At the highway department, the backhoe gets a lot less use. It will be used during the winter time to load a sand truck. Right now, we don't have anything to load sand trucks because all our loaders have plows on them and they're out plowing. So it's just, again, a shuffling of equipment and replacing it with a piece of equipment that gives the water and sewer a lot more flexibility.
Okay. Any questions for the Director? Councilor.
I'll make the following motion that the East Hampton City Council approve the supplemental appropriation, the amount of $125,000 be appropriated from retained earnings and appropriated to water mini excavator capital for the purpose of purchasing a small excavator.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second for supplemental appropriation of $125,000 for the purchase of a mini excavator. Any additional questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And the final supplemental appropriation tonight, also dated, I'll do a second reading, May 14th, 2015. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $125,000 and appropriated from retained earnings in that amount and appropriated to the wastewater treatment head works bar screen capital. And the purpose would be for the following: to provide funds to replace the head works bar screen. When this first came up, and all of these were unanimously approved by the subcommittee, but I think this one, when we finally heard it at the end, we said was the highest priority of all. And again, I'll let Director Kopchinski explain exactly what this piece of equipment does. So.
This is the first piece of equipment that the wastewater sees when it comes into the plant, and it's used to take out the inorganics, whether it's a rock or a brick or wood or whatever. There's a lot of material that comes through the wastewater treatment plant that shouldn't be in there, and we have to take it out before it ends up in another pump or in another piece of the process equipment further down the line in the treatment plant that could cause more damage. Right now, this machine isn't working, so on a daily basis, the guys actually have to manually remove the material that gets left in the channel, which isn't very efficient because some of that stuff isn't getting removed. So we're kind of like taking the chance that something's going to get through and something's going to cause some problems. So on every wastewater treatment plant, you have a piece of equipment like this that is essential to making the process work without damaging equipment down the line.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for the Director? Okay. Anyone from the public who would like to supplement appropriation? Okay, no, Councilor Hagan.
Okay, make the following motion that the East Hampton City Council approve the following supplemental appropriation, the amount of $125,000 that it be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings and appropriated to the wastewater treatment head bar screen capital in that amount.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the supplemental appropriation of $125,000 for the Headworks Bar Screen capital. Any additional comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn the public hearings?
Second.
To close the public hearings.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Motion to adjourn the city council.
I'm sorry, I told Councilor Hagan said he would like to make.
I just have a very brief thing, if I can indulge the council, I know it's been a long evening, but I wanted to speak mainly to the residents of East Hampton, in particular to the residents of Precinct 1. It had been my intention to run for re-election for one more term on the city council. However, in speaking with the Social Security Administration relative to my eligibility for benefits, under Medicare, I've learned that if I continue to work on the council for another term, it will trigger a lifelong financial Medicare penalty. For this reason, I will not seek re-election this fall, and I'll explain in greater detail. Because nomination papers are available starting in July, I wanted my intentions known now, and I will, of course, fulfill my obligations throughout the current term.
Can we vote on this?
Excuse me, the meeting's not done yet, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Also, I just want to say, remind everyone that the next meeting is not the first Wednesday in July, it'll be the second meeting in July, July 8th. But other than that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
So my plan, I'm saying...